Hello, and welcome to the Love Your Work Life podcast. I'm your host, Elissa Shuck. Whether you're going for that next promotion, looking for a job, or making a career pivot, I'll teach you how to navigate it all so you can have the career you want.
Welcome to the Love Your Work Life podcast, episode 28.
What is your salary expectation? What is your compensation requirement? These are very common questions that you'll be asked at some point in the interview process. And I don't want you to be afraid of having those conversations. What I will tell you is, it used to be that whole idea of salary requirements and compensation didn't happen until after you got to know them and they got to know you and you had more clarity around what the role required. But what I'm finding lately is that those conversations are happening much earlier in the interview process. So I want to share with you some tactics and thoughts that you can put on and adopt for yourself that will help you navigate those conversations much easier. So let's look at a couple of different scenarios. So let's assume that the recruiter who's reaching out to you about the role asks you, what are your salary requirements? What I want you to ask, not answer, is, what is your budget for the role? The reason I always suggest that this be your response to that question is because it keeps you in control of the conversation just a little bit longer. Because you can decide when you get the answer whether or not that meets your needs and requirements and even desire for what you want to be paid for the work that you'll be providing. So asking that question will hopefully give you a great answer. And if the range that's provided to you is within your range, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if it was even a raise? Then your answer is great. That's in my range. You don't need to give any more specifics. You don't need to get into what you made previously and if this is higher or lower. Just decide if that is in your range and know that this is just part of that early process. You're not committing to anything. You will have time to address that in the end, and we'll talk about that too. If in the course of that conversation, your response is, what's your budget for the role? And the person doesn't know or they're hesitant to tell you, and they really are pushing you for an answer, then I want you to make sure that you are not compromising. Make sure that your need, your requirement, and even your desire is included in the answer that you provide. So if you go in, and I'm just going to pull an easy number out. So if you go in and you really want to make $75K, then say, well, my range is 75 to 85. Give yourself that little wiggle room. And you might be thinking that, oh my gosh, well, what if that's too much? What if that eliminates me from consideration? And my answer is, okay. Do you really want to make less than that? This is good to know right up front, whether or not they can meet your needs and requirements, just like they're trying to figure that out about you. A job interview all the way through, from recruiter to panel to final interview, is your opportunity to evaluate the role just as much as it is them evaluating you. So please never forget that. The compensation, the salary piece of that is a component that you get to evaluate. What if the answer you get is a salary range that's lower than what you want, lower than what you need, or what you desire? Here's my proposal for how you answer that. I'm going to be perfectly honest. That salary range is a bit lower than what I would prefer. However, we're just starting this conversation. This is really early days, and I don't know enough about the role and the requirements, and you don't know enough about me and the value that I'll add and the impact that I can create for you. So if it's good with you, let's continue the conversation. I'd love to continue the conversation if you're open to that. By letting them know that you are open to continuing the conversation, you are giving the opportunity for them to really see the value that you add. For you to also understand what the role requires and give yourself the opportunity to showcase why you're an awesome candidate. By continuing the conversation, you are not committing to anything, but I do want you to make sure that it is a role that you really want, that it's a role that you're curious about, a company that you're intrigued by, because this is going to help you make your case down the road. So don't be afraid of something that is slightly out of your range, because really most companies are kind of expecting some salary negotiation at the end. And why wouldn't they try to stay at the low end of their budget if at all possible? Chances are they have some wiggle room. So don't let something that's slightly off deter you from continuing through the interview process if they're willing to. And you know what? If they're not, then that tells you something. And you can just check them off your list and not worry about it at all. Okay, so let's talk about the end of the interview process. What happens when you get that offer at the end and you know that you would really just like a little bit more? You really believe that there's a more equitable rate, a more equitable pay for the value that you deliver, for the knowledge and expertise and everything you're going to bring to the role. Here are some thoughts for you. The whole idea of compensation, what you get paid for the work you do, really comes down to an exchange of value. I want you to think about that. You are providing value, and in exchange, you are receiving value from that employer. Now, when you look at it in terms of value, that encompasses a lot of things. It doesn't necessarily all equal the annual salary for the role, what that paycheck represents. There are financial elements, and you want to make sure that it's meeting your needs and goals. But think of it like this. If the work is hybrid, if the commute is shorter, if the company pays a higher percentage of insurance coverage, these are all things that, from a financial perspective and even a little bit of a lifestyle perspective, are considerations that you want to understand and things you want to evaluate as to whether or not this role is a good fit for you in that exchange of value. But there's other value that's intangible. Is this a company that you admire? Do you really connect with their vision and values? Are there opportunities for growth that you've been craving and that were missing in your previous role? That all equals value too. So those are the things that you should also consider when you are making your decision about whether it's right for you. I'm a big believer that you do not have to settle and you do not have to compromise on your salary just because you're making a change, just because you need a job. And especially for those of you out there who are considering a pivot, Please do not assume that just because you're entering a new industry or you're pivoting to a new role, that means that you have to take a step backwards, either in the role and certainly in the compensation, because it's just not true. Understand your value, understand what you bring to the table, because when you do, you're going to be able to ask for what you want with a straight face. That's half the battle. But here's how you can approach, practically speaking, the compensation that's offered that isn't really quite there. Say something like this: "Thank you for the offer. Here are some thoughts I have about it. Based on what I learned throughout the interview process, based on the value that I bring and the impact that I know I can have. For example, you mentioned XYZ. Pick a pain point that you learned in the interview process that you know you can address for that hiring manager. Mention it in this conversation about salary. Based on what I learned, I know I can create this impact for you. And for me, the equitable exchange is $75K. We've been using that number, so let's just use it again. Now, if that is in the range of 10 to 15% higher than the offer, or maybe even in the 5 to 10K range above the offer, chances are that's not going to freak them out. That is not going to be a problem. There's usually that much wiggle room. So be prepared with your number so that you can throw it out there confidently, concisely. You're not making a big case for yourself to justify that amount. You're just simply saying, based on what I've learned and based on what I know I can do for you, the compensation for what I can bring equals this. Now, you will probably be put in a situation where they're going to come back to you. They're going to have to go back and crunch some numbers, and that's okay too. Do not let that response upset you, because they do have a budget that they have to look at. That's probably a reality. So know that just because they're taking a little time to think it through, it doesn't mean that anything has gone wrong in the process. And chances are they're going to come back with what you want. I've seen it over and over and over again. Now let's talk about how you get your number. And I love, love, love what one of my coaches, Frank Kern, talks about when it comes to figuring out your number. If you don't know what that is, then you don't know how to talk about it, and your brain certainly doesn't know how to seek out the opportunities that are more aligned with that compensation level. So to use Frank's term, he calls it an abundance budget. What do you want to make, not just have to make? So go through all of your expenses. Figure out, what do you pay for your house, your cars, your meals? Put some money in there for fun. Put some money in there for savings, insurance, utilities, all that stuff. Maybe not just what you're currently paying, but what if it's time to get a new car? How much are you going to pay for that car? What if you want to upgrade your lifestyle in some way? Figure that into your budget now. Build that into your number now. Don't wait for it to happen someday. Don't think, okay, I've got to start here, and then maybe in a year I'll get a raise, and then I'll be able to do the things I want to do. No, if you find yourself in transition, if you find yourself seeking another role for whatever reason, take this opportunity to give yourself a raise. Simply by knowing your number and then knowing how to translate that into the value that you deliver. If you're doing interviews right, then you've been communicating your value very effectively throughout the interview. If you've got a great resume, then you already pre-marketed yourself. Is that even a word? You've already positioned yourself as someone with high value. The understanding all along the way is going to be, wow, if we want this person, we're going to have to pay. It's going to be a worthwhile exchange of value in what we provide as well as what we get. That's what's going to be going on in the mind of the hiring manager. Trust me, I know, because I've been there. And I've gone in and made a case for someone I really wanted to hire. And the hiring manager that wants you and knows that you are going to be the solution to their problems, the person to help them achieve all of their aspirations and quotas and goals that they've been given for their role in the company, when they see someone who can help them do all that, they'll be willing to go to bat for you. Trust me. So don't be afraid of these compensation conversations. Don't be afraid to know what you want and ask for what you want. It's 100% possible. Just knowing what that number is, and then your belief in yourself that you are worth it is half the battle right there. So have some fun. Get out there. Know what you want and ask for what you want. And don't be afraid of the word negotiation. They're probably feeling just as awkward talking about money as you are, because no one teaches us how to do it. So you take the lead, you take control, and see what kind of results you get.
Hey, if you enjoy listening to this podcast, you have to come check out my Love Your Work Life programs on Teachable. You can choose from on-demand courses or personalized one-on-one coaching with me. We take all of this material and apply it so that you can live it and create the career you want. Because when you love your work life, all the other parts of life get better too. So go to Love Your Work Life Teachable as search terms, or love-your-work-life.teachable.com. I will see you there.